Okay, relative to Hinduism, returning to Gandhi, though Gandhi was opposed to untouchability and caste, that's Hinduism. He did not carry his opposition to its logical conclusion. Inconsistently enough, he continued to support the VV based on birth. At one stage, he even supported restrictions on interdining and intermarriage. As he wrote in Young India in 1921, Hinduism does most emphatically discourage interdining and intermarriage between divisions. It is no part of a Hindu's duty to dine with his son, and by restricting his choice of bride to a particular group, he exercises rare self-restraint. So if it's okay, if it's rare, wow. Prohibition against intermarriages and interdining is essential for the rapid evolution of the soul, he says. Later, Gandhi moved away from these orthodox ideas and started supporting intercaste marriages. So the Gandhi of forward, the Gandhi of later and backward, which Gandhi is he? Finally, in 1946, he refused to solemnize any marriage of Savagram Ashram unless one of the parties was an untouchable. Maybe he would have also have given up Varna VV if he had lived longer. That, however, is in the realm of imagination. The fact is that Gandhi supported VV. It is worth noting that he invented his own conception of VV, which, according to him, I don't know, you can do that, had nothing to do with the feeling of superiority and inferiority or with prohibition against intermarriage. We find here in Gandhi a quaint mixture of conservatism and reformism. I would like to dispose of one last objection before concluding this section. One may say that the Hindu law at present is quite different from what Manu desired, and presently Hindus in general do not follow Manu in totality. They just pick and choose. This is true. The Hindu law at present, for instance, allows intercaste marriage and prohibits bigamy and child marriage. It permits divorce. It also allows widow remarriage, and it grants equal rights to daughters and fathers' property. Nevertheless, there seems to be a gap between the progressive Hindu law and the conservative social practices of the Hindus. What's on paper is not reflecting what's in reality. The majority of Hindu marriages are still within the caste, and very few Hindu women actually claim or get a share in father's property. The Indian Constitution has rightly made special provisions, such as reservations in services for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other socially and educationally backward classes to enable them to enter occupations and positions of power, which had been traditionally denied to them. No doubt some upper caste liberal Hindus, too, support the policy of reservation, but by and large the Hindu upper castes are far from fully reconciled to this progressive step, as is evident from violent and aggressive anti-reservation agitation spearheaded by upper caste students from time to time. This kind of reactionary agitation aimed at preserving the present dominance of upper castes in education and the services enjoys considerable support and sympathy in the upper caste-dominated media as well as the academia. On the whole, the Hindu society is yet to fully exorcise the ghost of Manu. Caste based on birth and untouchability still exist in the Hindu society, in spite of the fact that untouchability has been abolished by the Indian Constitution. The distribution of education, power, and wealth continues to be uneven in the Hindu society, with the Dvijas being on the top and the Shudras and the untouchables being at the bottom. Teaching is no more an exclusive preserve of Brahmins, but the occupation of Hindu priests is still fully reserved for Brahmins, though this fact does not arouse the ire of our fervent anti-reservationists. We have Moksha, Kamavada, Avataravada. Moksha is traditionally regarded as the highest end of life in Hindu religion. The endless cycle of birth and death is considered a bondage from which one must attain liberation. That is moksha and mukti. This whole concept of bondage and liberation is based on the unproved assumption of life after death, and the existence of soul, atma, which continues to exist apart from the body even after death. Biblically speaking, there is a resurrection after the dead because of the inviolability, non-contradictory quality of the Bible itself, which is not so the case in the Hindu writings. In the famous words of Gita, the soul changes bodies just as human beings change clothes. Now, that's not biblical. Now, there are no good reasons for believing in the existence of soul or life after death and rebirth in the Hindu writings, but certainly in the Bible there are. These beliefs are not at all supported by incontrovertible scientific evidence, which there is in the Bible. First of all, a scientific examination of the non-contradictory quality of the Bible is right there for anybody to observe and report and test. So, according to S.N. Dasgupta, there has seldom been, before or after Buddha, any serious attempt to prove or disprove the doctrine of rebirth. That means in reincarnation. The attempts to prove the doctrine of rebirth in the Hindu philosophical works, such as Nyaya, are slight and inadequate. However, even before Buddha, Lokayat had disproved the existence of soul, life after death, and rebirth, heaven or hell, as on an empirical basis, which you cannot do. You have to look at the writings on it, see if they're wholly reliable, and they are in the Bible, but not here in the Hindu writings, as these things are never perceived. Not in this life, that's true. Thus, in absence of any evidence to the contrary, it is reasonable to believe that each one of us has got one and only one life. Well, that's true in the Bible. We have been appointed once to live, and then the judgment. If you're judged at the cross, you get through. If you don't get through, you go to the lake of fire. That's punishment. Once a person is dead, he is dead forever, never to be reborn. Mind, consciousness, memory, and life cannot outlast the destruction of brain and body. Well, that's the opinion, but it's not proved either way in the Hindu writings. This is the harsh truth, howsoever we may dislike it. The belief in soul seems to have originated from primitive animism. If this belief continues to persist, in spite of total lack of evidence in its support, it is only because of the human being's inability to come to terms with or to squarely face the reality of death. Well, that's not true, actually. You have a reliable writing on the issue of complete inviolability, and corroboration. That's something you believe until something better comes along. Because you can't decide either way on empirical evidence, as the man said. So you can't then turn around and say, I don't think it's true because I don't have evidence that it is true. Well, you don't have evidence that it isn't true either. So you can't be scientific that way. One draws comfort from the thought that one will not die even after death and continue to live in some other form. It is paradoxical that, first, the fear of death and love of life makes one readily accept the belief in the immortality and rebirth of soul without adequate evidence, and then getting rid of this alleged cycle of birth and death itself becomes the topmost religious aim. The problem of getting released from the alleged cycle of birth and death is a pseudo-problem, in the sense that one is trying to get rid of something which simply does not exist. And moksha in the Hindu writings, but not in the Hebrew writings. And moksha is an imaginary ideal which has nothing to do with the reality. Instead of running after the imaginary ideal of moksha, it is far better to concentrate on improving and living well this one and only life which we have. Mimamsa, which is an orthodox Hindu school of thought, considers attainment of heaven, swarga, instead of moksha, as the highest end of life. References to heaven and hell are also to be found in the Manusmriti. The belief in heaven is fairly widespread at popular level. However, the ideal of the attainment of heaven, too, is based on unproved assumptions, like life after death and the existence of heaven, and, therefore, it cannot be accepted. Well, if you focus completely on Hindu writings, that's true. If you focus on the Bible with its inerrancy, you tend to accept it until something better comes along. You can't prove or disprove something with evidence that is better than the Bible if it doesn't exist. The Bible is there. Trust in it until something better comes along. And it won't. Another related doctrine is the Hindu belief in karmavada, or the so-called law of karma. According to this doctrine, every human being gets the fruits of his actions either in the present or in some future life. Whatever a human being is in his present life is the result of his own actions in the past life or lives. This, again, is a totally unverified and unverifiable doctrine based on the assumption of the cycle of birth and death. Well, it's unverifiable on any assumptions. It is only a convenient tool for explaining away the perceived inequality in human society. Well, that's how it's used in the Hebrew writings. Unfortunately, the experience has been mankind has been evil to one another, and the Bible, which is wholly reliable, explains it. It's the sin nature and not some cycle of birth and death. The idea of karma is found in Buddhism and Jainism as well. However, these religions do not support VV, but in Hinduism, the doctrine of karma, along with the idea of God, has been used for providing ideological support to the unjust VV and making it appear just and fair. In Hinduism, the so-called law of karma merely serves the purpose of legitimizing the unjust VV by making the Shudras and the untouchables meekly accept their degrading position as a result of their own deeds in imaginary past lives, and by assuring them better birth in this next life if they faithfully perform their VD, the Varna Dharma, in their present lives. In this way, this doctrine prevents them from revolting against this man-made, undemocratic system, which has nothing to do with alleged past and future lives. Lastly, I come to the Hindu doctrine of Avatarvada. According to this doctrine, whenever a religion is threatened in this world, God takes birth as an avatar to put things back into order. Ram and Krishna, for example, are popularly regarded as avatars by the Hindus. Belief in Avatarvada, too, is logically unjustifiable and merely makes one run away from one's own responsibilities. Instead of making efforts to improve their own condition, those who believe in Avatarvada keep waiting for an avatar to take birth. Since God does not exist, well, that's the Hindu version, there is no question of his being born of this earth as an avatar. Let me add here that I also do not believe in the truth of statements like Jesus is the Son of God or Muhammad is the messenger of God. Well, you can believe Jesus is the Son of God because of the quality of the writings of the Bible. You can't believe something because you want to or don't want to. You believe something because of the evidence is there, historical and biblical. If 40 authors wrote 66 books without an error or contradiction and perfect transformation of ideas from one to the next with no contradictions at all, and the prophecies predicted fulfilled so far so good 100% in every detail, I'd say that's a believable book until something better comes along. Now, as far as Muhammad is the messenger of God, we find that there's so many contradictions in the Quran that we can't trust it. Not only I do not regard Ram and Krishna or anyone else as an avatar of God, but also do not regard them as ideal personalities. Ram, as mentioned earlier, was an upholder of the VV. His cruel behavior with Sita, after fighting a destructive war with Ravana to get her released, is too well known to need recapitulation. Krishna, on the other hand, is portrayed as the Mahabharata, as the teacher of Bhagavad Gita, a book which expounds doctrines like the belief in God and immortal soul, Avatarvada, Kamavada, and the others, of the doctrine of moksha. In Mahabharata, Krishna adopts and advocates adoption of unfair means like lying and deception for achieving one's ends. Obviously, he did not believe in the doctrine of purity of ends and means. And there are several flaws in the character of Krishna as portrayed in the Mahabharata and others. These have been ably enumerated by Dr. Ambedkar in his The Riddle of Ram and Krishna. I refer the interested reader to this work for a fuller treatment on this subject. We have a conclusion. He categorically rejects major Hindu religious beliefs, including the doctrine of infallibility of the Vedas, the VD, the Varnashram, the Dharma, Moksha, Kamavada, and Avatarvada. I am not an admirer of Ram and Krishna, and I also do not believe in idol worship or the Hindu taboo of not eating beef. Let's go to the last few sentences here. Hopefully you have time, but it's a total. The only thing I object to is you can examine the book of Hindu and see the contradictions there, but then you can't conclude that your beliefs in the Bible aren't valid either, because if you haven't read it and verified its reliability, then you don't have anything to say until scientifically examined. Oops. Let's go to